There comes a moment unexpected, disarming, when the world begins to lose its edges. The colors that once dazzled you fade into muted tones. The music you once lived inside of now sounds like it's being played in another room. Your body moves. Your lips speak. You smile when you must. But there's a subtle fracture. The soul no longer follows. You wake and the air tastes like nothing. You scroll through song after song, searching for the one that used to move your blood, and nothing lands. You walk among people exchanging words, and every syllable falls like ash. You try to remember the things that used to excite you, the laughter that would erupt without warning, the passions that once pulled you from bed before dawn. But now they are silent, and you wonder if you've lost something essential, if some vital thread has slipped from your hands without you noticing. It is tempting to call this laziness or burnout or even depression in the way society tends to label anything it doesn't understand. But Jung would tell you that this emptiness is not simply a symptom to be medicated away. It is a signal, a summons, a rupture in the surface life you've been living, a knock at the inner door that no longer allows you to pretend. From the moment you arrived in this world, you were given a script, an identity pre-written by family, culture, circumstance. You learned early what pleased others and what didn't. You learned which parts of you were welcome and which were dangerous. You learned to shape yourself into masks: the good child, the achiever, the helper, the strong one, the quiet one. These masks became so familiar that you mistook them for your face. But a mask cannot breathe. It cannot feel. It cannot hold the vastness of what you truly are. And somewhere inside, beneath years of performance and adaptation, your unlived life has been stirring. Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." But what about the unlived life within you? The neglected parts you dismissed, buried beneath duties, expectations, survival. They do not disappear. They wait. And when they can no longer wait, they send you this message, this hollowness you feel now. The loss of interest is not a void. It is a voice, a silent scream from the self, not for what it can do, but for what it is. You were never designed to live entirely on the surface. You were not built to survive on checklists, timelines, likes, follows, and rewards that lack substance. And yet you've been told for so long that this is what life is. So you've played along even when the roles began to feel too small. Now the distractions have lost their flavor, the roles no longer fit, and you feel that aching, shapeless sense that nothing is truly fun anymore, that nothing reaches you. But this is not the end of you. This is the moment before revelation. Jung called it a sacred descent, not into madness, but into truth, a necessary unraveling of false identities. The death of the persona. The mind will rebel. The ego will panic. The world will feel distant because you are not meant to remain who you were. The old life has become too small for the soul you've grown into. This is not boredom, it is a refusal of the soul to be fed by lies any longer. We've been taught to fear silence, to fill every moment with movement, every gap with content. But silence is the gateway to the unconscious, and only in stillness can you hear that quiet voice that has always whispered beneath the noise. That voice is not interested in your productivity. It does not care about your performance. It wants your truth, your unfiltered, unapproved, unapologetic truth. And yet most people will do anything to avoid facing it. Jung observed that human beings will go to absurd lengths, working endlessly, numbing themselves with substances, drowning in entertainment, just to escape the mirror of the self. But the emptiness does not vanish. It deepens. It follows you into every achievement, every relationship, every attempt to feel normal again, because the self cannot be outrun, it can only be met. So the silence stretches longer. The colors fade further, until eventually, if you are willing to be honest, you see it for what it is, not a curse, but the beginning. The beginning of your return, not to who you were told to be, but to who you truly are. And this return is not instant. It asks more of you than a new hobby, more than a change of scenery. It asks for your rebirth, and rebirth is never clean. It is messy, painful, sacred. It demands that you confront the illusions you once called identity, that you grieve the parts of you that cannot survive the truth, that you walk into the inner wilderness without a map. But in that wilderness beyond distraction, beyond comfort, beyond the life you constructed, you will meet yourself, not the one crafted for applause, not the one molded by trauma or expectation, but the one who remembers, the one who never forgot the fire, the one who knows how to live without permission. This self may not hand you all the answers, but it holds the one thing you have been starving for: presence. And in presence, even the smallest moment becomes sacred. The sunrise no longer serves as background decoration, it speaks. A forgotten song stirs the blood faintly again. A conversation lands somewhere deeper than it used to. These are not distractions returning. This is life returning. Jung called this the process of individuation, not becoming someone new, but remembering who you have always been beneath the layers. And when you begin to see that meaning was never gone, only hidden beneath fear and habit, you realize the soul cannot breathe through armor. You were not made to be permanently entertained. You were made to ache, to yearn to evolve. The reason nothing feels interesting anymore is not that you are broken. It's that you have reached the edge of who you used to be. And what lies ahead will not be given to you by the world. It must be claimed from within. You are standing at the threshold of an invisible frontier. The old road has ended, but the new one has not yet revealed itself. It is here in this in-between that most people turn back. The emptiness frightens them. The lack of clear direction feels unbearable. But you have begun to suspect that this hollow space is not a punishment. It is an initiation. In Jung's language, what you are feeling is the stirring of the shadow, not in the way culture paints it as something sinister, but as the unlived and unacknowledged parts of you pressing against the walls of your awareness. These are not demons. They are exiles. The truths you hid away because they didn't fit the life you were given. They have been growing roots in your unconscious, waiting for the moment when your surface life would crack enough to let them through. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the parts of you that were denied love, and within it lies the key to your wholeness. Jung understood that healing doesn't come from light alone. You cannot transcend the shadow. You must integrate it. To become whole, you must reclaim every part of yourself, even the bruised, the shamed, the inconvenient, especially the shamed. At first, this feels impossible. The mind has been trained to protect the image you've spent years constructing, the persona, that carefully curated version of yourself you present to the world. It is the mask you learned to wear to survive, and it did its job well. It helped you belong. It kept you safe. But now that mask has become a prison. The persona is not your enemy, but it is not the whole truth either. And when life demands your wholeness, the persona will begin to fracture. The moments that once brought you pleasure no longer reach you because they were built to feed the mask, not the soul. As this false scaffolding begins to crumble, you might feel lost. You might wonder if you're falling apart. But in truth, you are falling inward into the deeper, untamed layers of your being. The reason the world feels dull is that your soul is refusing to be sedated any longer. The games you once played, the roles you once performed, no longer satisfy the hunger you carry. We are taught to resist this. We are told to stay busy, to just push through, to distract ourselves until the feeling passes. But distraction is no cure, it is a delay. The emptiness will wait for you. It will follow you into every room, every relationship, every goal until you turn toward it. Jung believed that silence is the gateway to the unconscious, and so the work begins in stillness. It is not glamorous work. It does not make for an impressive story to tell at parties. It is quiet, inward, often uncomfortable. You sit in your room and feel the boredom pressing in. You notice the urge to escape into a screen, into a drink, into anything that will numb the itch. And instead you stay. You breathe. You listen. At first you hear nothing but static, the restless chatter of the mind demanding to be entertained. But if you are patient, if you refuse to run, something else begins to emerge. A voice you've ignored for years. It speaks in feelings, in images, in fragments of memory. It has no interest in your reputation or your schedule. It only cares about the truth of your being. This is the self, not the ego, not the mask, but the living center of your psyche. It has been with you since before language, before identity, before you learned to bend yourself to fit the world. And though it has been buried beneath years of noise, it has never stopped pulsing, never stopped waiting. You begin to realize that the loss of interest you feel is not the end of meaning, it is the clearing away of everything false so that meaning can reveal itself. The silence is not empty, it is spacious. It is a womb preparing to birth something new from within you. In this space, you do not need to force inspiration. You do not need to chase joy. You only need to be present enough to notice when something stirs. It might be the way the light falls through the trees. It might be a dream that lingers in your mind after waking. It might be a conversation that touches a place in you long thought dormant. These are not coincidences. They are threads. The more you follow these threads, the more you find that meaning does not come from stimulation, but from depth, from being willing to feel all of it, the beauty and the grief, the joy and the fear. Presence makes even the smallest detail shimmer, and once you taste life this way, you will never again settle for a life built only on distraction. You see now that the boredom was not a wall, it was a doorway, and you were never meant to escape it. You were meant to step through. The doorway leads you somewhere you did not expect, downward, inward, into places you have avoided for years. Here the light is dim and the air feels dense. This is the territory Jung called the inner wilderness, where the map you've been using no longer applies. Here time slows. The usual signposts, success, praise, approval, are nowhere to be found. Instead, you are met with sensations, symbols, and the haunting presence of everything you've left unresolved. You begin to encounter the fragments you've disowned, the grief you told yourself was too heavy to carry, the anger you buried because you feared it would make you unlovable, the longings you dismissed as unrealistic. They appear here in the silence not to punish you, but to be acknowledged. This is the work of shadow integration, to turn toward what you once exiled and say, I see you. You belong. You. The shadow is not here to destroy you. It is here to make you whole. But wholeness is not perfection. Wholeness means carrying contradictions without needing to resolve them into something neat. It means allowing yourself to be both tender and fierce, both light and dark, both certain and uncertain. Jung understood that healing is not about becoming pure. It is about becoming real. The old self will resist. The persona will try to convince you to retreat to safer ground, to go back to the roles and routines that kept you comfortably asleep. But there is no going back. The life you once knew can no longer contain you. You have outgrown it, and this growth is not graceful. It is raw, disorienting, and full of moments where you will want to turn away. In these moments, you will be tempted to interpret the emptiness as failure. You might look at others who seem happy, fulfilled together, and feel the sharp pang of comparison. But appearances deceive. Many are still wearing the mask. Many are still performing the version of life they were given, mistaking motion for meaning. What you are doing is different. You are refusing to pretend. You are refusing to numb yourself back into compliance. You are letting the false layers fall away, even though it leaves you exposed. This exposure is not weakness. It is the soil in which your authenticity grows. As you stand in this rawness, something begins to shift. You start to notice symbols emerging from the unconscious, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in sudden moments of clarity. A dream might bring you to a vast ocean, its waves both terrifying and beautiful. A stranger in a conversation might say a sentence that feels oddly significant. These are messages from the deeper layers of your psyche, guiding you toward the next step in your becoming. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through symbols because symbols carry more than logic, they carry soul. To interpret them is not to reduce them to a simple meaning, but to feel into the energy they bring. The ocean might not be about water at all. It might be the vastness of your own emotional life calling you back. You begin to sense that life itself is speaking to you through these symbols. Every encounter, every moment of stillness, every ache becomes part of the conversation. And the more you listen, the more the grayness begins to shift. Not into bright, blinding color all at once, but into subtle shades of depth you had forgotten existed. This is the slow thaw. A sunrise catches your breath in a way it hasn't in years. A piece of music, one you've heard 100 times, suddenly reaches a place in you you thought was gone. A shared glance with someone feels alive, electric, without any need to explain why. These are not distractions returning to soothe you. They are reminders that you are capable of presence again, that the spark you thought you had lost was never gone. It was simply buried under layers of noise, fear, and forgetting. Individuation, Jung's term for the journey you are now on, is not a single event. It is an unfolding. It is the daily practice of living from the center of your being rather than from the surface. It is the refusal to live only in reaction to the world's demands and the choice to live in response to your soul's invitations. And here is the quiet truth. You begin to understand the goal is not to make life endlessly exciting. The goal is to make life real. And real life contains seasons, some vibrant, some barren, some uncertain. To live fully is to honor all of them without clinging to one or fleeing from another. So when the emptiness returns, and it will, you no longer treat it as a threat. You treat it as a companion, a messenger, a reminder that there is more to meet within yourself. You welcome it in, offer it a seat, and ask what it has come to show you this time. And in that welcoming, you realize the fear of boredom has lost its grip on you. There is a strange freedom in no longer fearing the stillness. When you stop running from it, you discover that the silence is not an absence, it is a presence. At first, it feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, like stepping into a vast and echoing cathedral where you are the only one inside. But slowly you begin to hear the subtle music that has always been playing here, the rhythm of your breath, the faint hum of awareness, the quiet pulse of being itself. In that stillness, the self, the deep center of who you are, begins to rise. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply makes itself known, like a flame that has been patiently burning in a darkened room, waiting for you to notice. And when you do, there is a recognition so profound that it bypasses the mind entirely. You remember that you are not here merely to be entertained or distracted. You are here to awaken. The awakening is not dramatic. It does not explode into your life with fireworks. Instead, it unfurls like dawn light, slowly touching everything you thought was lost. You begin to see the patterns of your own avoidance, how often you've filled the ache with noise, how much you've mistaken movement for growth. You see how easy it was to confuse the intensity of stimulation with the depth of meaning. And here is where another of Jung's truths becomes real for you. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The emptiness you've been feeling is not darkness to banish, but darkness to understand. It holds the contours of your unlived life, the shape of your true needs, the whispers of your deeper purpose. This is where projection begins to dissolve. Before, you may have looked outward for the source of your dissatisfaction, blaming other people's circumstances, the state of the world. But as you step deeper into your own psyche, you see that much of what you resisted out there was a reflection of what you had not yet accepted in here. The judgments you cast, the resentments you carried, the fantasies you chased, they were all mirrors. And when you reclaim the parts of yourself you had abandoned, those projections lose their power. Relationships begin to shift in unexpected ways. Some deepen because you are finally meeting others without the mask. Some fall away not out of conflict, but because they were built to fit the version of you that no longer exists. The more you inhabit your wholeness, the less space there is for anything that requires you to fragment yourself again. This can feel like loss, but it is really liberation. You are no longer bound to connections that demand your silence or your pretending. You are no longer dependent on constant novelty to feel alive. You find nourishment in what is simple, unadorned, and true. The same cup of tea becomes a meditation. The same street you've walked 1,000 times becomes a ceremony. The same sky becomes your cathedral. From the outside, your life may appear quieter, but from within, it feels vast. Every moment is layered with depth because you are fully here for it, not leaning forward into the next thing, not leaning back into what's gone, but inhabiting the exact space where your feet meet the ground. And you begin to understand another paradox of this path. Fulfillment is not found by chasing what feels good. It is found by allowing yourself to feel fully. That means joy, yes, but also grief, frustration, longing, and uncertainty. You stop categorizing your emotions as good or bad, welcome or unwelcome, and instead treat them all as honored guests. Each one is a messenger from the unconscious, each one part of the ongoing dialogue between your surface life and your deeper being. The work now is not to fix yourself, but to be in conscious relationship with yourself, to honor the part of you that still aches, to listen to the part of you that still dreams, to care for the part of you that still fears. This is integration, not a final state of perfection, but a living, breathing wholeness that can hold all of who you are. You notice that the old question, "Why is nothing interesting anymore?" has begun to dissolve. Not because you've found a new source of excitement, but because you've discovered something richer than excitement: depth. And depth doesn't fade when the lights go out. Depth doesn't depend on novelty. It waits for you in every moment you are willing to meet it. In this space, life is no longer something you pass through half asleep. It is something you participate in consciously, moment by moment, breath by breath. You are no longer trying to get somewhere. You are here. And here is where the transformation truly begins. Now the transformation takes on a different texture. It is less about breaking apart and more about unfolding into what has always been there. The frantic urgency to find yourself begins to fade, replaced by a quieter understanding you were never truly lost. You were only scattered, your attention pulled in 1,000 directions by the demands of the outer world. What you are doing now is not searching, it is gathering. You gather the fragments you left behind in childhood, the wonder that could lose hours staring at the shape of clouds, the curiosity that once asked questions without fear of sounding strange. You gather the parts of you that adulthood taught you to hide, the tenderness that loves without condition, the fire that refuses to be tamed. These are not luxuries. They are the raw materials of your wholeness. In Jungian terms, you are experiencing the dialogue between the conscious self and the unconscious. At times, this meeting feels like a reunion. At others, it feels like a confrontation. Dreams take on new significance. They are no longer random sequences, but living symbols rich with meaning. A dream might bring you face to face with a figure who frightens you, a shadow aspect demanding to be integrated. Or it might bring you to a place that feels both ancient and entirely your own, a glimpse of the self guiding you forward. You begin to live with more awareness of the archetypes moving within you. You feel the anima, or animus, your inner counterpart, emerging in subtle ways, softening or strengthening aspects of your psyche that had been imbalanced. You see how your relationships mirror this process, how each person who enters your life becomes both teacher and reflection, showing you the parts of yourself you've yet to claim. In this new awareness, you stop seeing your suffering as meaningless. You see it as part of the alchemy that shapes you. The pain you once tried to escape becomes a forge. It strips away the unnecessary burns off the false and leaves you with the essence that cannot be destroyed. You no longer look for ways to avoid difficulty. You look for ways to meet it with presence. And something miraculous happens. The fear of emptiness becomes reverence for space. Where once you filled every gap with noise, you now protect your silences as if they were sacred ground. You choose what you allow into your mind and body with discernment, not out of fear, but out of love for the clarity you've found. You understand now how easily the self can be drowned in constant input, and you will not pay that price again. The world around you hasn't changed. The streets are the same. The sky is the same. The people carry on as before. But your perception is different, and that difference changes everything. Where others see monotony, you see texture. Where others scroll past life, you sit with it. You no longer need 1,000 things to stimulate you. You only need one thing to move you deeply, and you are willing to wait for it, to listen for it, to receive it fully when it comes. This is the quiet power of individuation. You are no longer chasing happiness. You are becoming whole. The same cup of tea becomes a meditation. The same walk becomes a pilgrimage. The same conversation becomes a threshold into truth. The difference is not in the event, it is in you. And now the initial crisis that brought you here, the dullness, the lack of interest, has revealed itself for what it truly was, a summons. It stripped away the old illusions so you could remember the life that exists beneath them. The spark you thought was gone was never the source of your aliveness. It was merely a light guiding you to the deeper fire. That fire is yours now. It burns not for attention, not for validation, but for truth. And from this truth, your life will never again be a performance. It will be a conversation with the deepest part of yourself, a steady becoming that needs no applause. What happens next is subtle but irreversible. You stop bargaining with life. You stop pleading for the old feelings to return, the old pleasures to reignite. You no longer beg for the spark you mourned because you understand now it was never about getting back what was lost. It was about stepping into what is next. The terrain of your inner world has shifted. You are no longer standing on the familiar roads where stimulation could carry you forward for miles. You are in the deep forest now, the sacred, uncharted forest of becoming. In this place, joy is not born from constant novelty, but from surrender. Peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the integration of it. Here, you no longer live to avoid pain. You live to embody truth. And truth demands that you face the very things you once ran from. The silence, the stillness, the unanswered questions. They are no longer enemies, but companions. They travel with you like guides who will not speak unless you are willing to listen. When you sit with them long enough, you hear what they've been saying all along. I am not here to break you. I am here to bring you back to yourself. This is the voice of the unconscious, the part of you that has never been touched by the masks, the noise, or the roles. Jung taught that this hidden center is not chaos to be feared, but a reservoir of guidance waiting patiently until you are ready to hear it. And so your life begins to simplify, not because you are retreating, but because you are aligning. You start measuring your days not by how much you've achieved, but by how deeply you have shown up. You do not need everything to feel good to feel alive. You can stand in sorrow and still feel the holiness of the moment. You can be in uncertainty and still trust the ground beneath you. This trust is not naive. It is the trust of someone who has walked into the abyss and returned not with answers but with presence. You know now that no amount of outer accomplishment can replace the feeling of being truly here. You know that fulfillment is not a peak you reach, but a depth you inhabit. From this depth, your relationships transform. You stop performing for connection and start creating from authenticity. You no longer cling to those who cannot meet you in your truth. They fall away naturally without bitterness. And those who remain or arrive anew are drawn to the frequency you now carry, a frequency of wholeness, of grounded depth. You no longer fear solitude. You no longer interpret stillness as absence. You have learned that being alone with yourself is not loneliness. It is communion. It is sitting with the only constant companion you will ever have, your own soul. And far from being empty, this companionship is infinite. Life in this space looks quieter to the outside world, but within it feels alive in ways you never imagined possible. There is a richness to every breath, a subtle beauty in moments that once passed unnoticed. You walk slower, speak with more intention, and listen not just to others, but to the undercurrents of your own being. You stop treating your life as something to consume and start treating it as something to co-create. Every choice becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of your becoming. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to embody the truth you've claimed. You do not need the world to change for you to feel alive. You carry your aliveness with you wherever you go. And here is the quiet miracle. The dullness that once felt like the end of everything was in truth the beginning of your return.